Hi, I'm Josh. Welcome back to my channel. Today, my March wrap-up. Every book that I read in March, which wasn't that many, I guess, by some of my highest standards, but wasn't too bad. I read 6 books this month, and I had 1 DNF. So I consider that, I guess, a pretty good month. I think they were all around 300 to 400 pages, with the exception of one being about 700 pages. That's not true. I had 1 novella, 2 novellas, 3 300-ish pages, and 1 700 pages. I've posted several reviews already, which I'm excited about. They don't get a lot of traction, but I will refer you to many of those as I go through these books. I'm going to go from my worst to my best, try to keep you interested, stay around for the best at the very end. But without further ado, let's get into the books that I read for March of 2023. So up first, let's start with my DNF, Witch 13 by Patrick Delaney. I'm just very sad to DNF this book. I was 45% into it, and it wasn't bad, but I was getting to the end of the month, and I realized, I have so many things I want to be reading. I'm not reading as much as I'd like to. So why am I pushing myself to push through a book that really isn't clicking for me? It wasn't bad. It just wasn't very compelling. This is a story about this town, following this one particular woman who is retiring from the town, from the cop load rather. She's leaving the town, and there's this weird thing happening where there seems to be a witch in town. I quit where things would just start to get more explicit in the fact that everyone's going to realize that there's a witch that is actually a witch. Why did I not like this? Well, let's start with the fact that it felt unoriginal. And that's not like to say it's generic. I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's original in some sense. It's just, to me, it didn't feel as if it was breaking any boxes, and I just didn't feel compelled by the characters. I'm not a big fan of books that focus on cops. I don't understand the fixation on giving us a cop perspective, even someone who's supposed to be a quote-unquote good cop. It wasn't appealing to me. Not to say we're fixated just on her, but that was the center point. And it was just, I could see the things coming along. We're going to be trapped in a snowstorm late at night as a town, and they're going to have to survive this witch. There are ways in which the witch is superpowered. There are other times where the witch is doing weird things. And I guess some of it's the mystery, and I get that. I was just remarkably disinterested. I felt like this book, being fantastical in some ways, dark, horrific, it should have appealed to me. It should have worked better than it did. And so I gave up on it. It wasn't on audio, so I was doing a text-to-speech reader, but as you will see, my best book of the month, spoilers, was a text-to-speech reader. So it's not as if that is a big hindrance if the book is good. And this just wasn't working for me, so I decided I'm not going to push through it. I'm also irked because on NetGalley, it's very explicitly listed as an LGBTQ book. And it's not. From the 45% I could find, there was nothing I could see that was explicit. I don't think Patrick Delaney is queer. When I Googled it again, like from on Goodreads and whatnot, there was no information about it being actually queer. I'm actually quite irked at NetGalley in this situation because I'm willing to give queer books more leeway. And honestly, I'm more interested in queer horror than other books. I'm not going to explain myself here. If that's something that needs explaining, tell me in the comments, and I'm happy to make a video about why I'm more interested in queer books than just generic books. And I'm not saying I don't read those. My God, it is becoming a lecture now. I remain irked at NetGalley for doing this. Demon Theory. This one is a series of screenplays in the form of a novelization of screenplays by Stephen Graham Jones. And this one was good. I'm giving it 3.5 stars rounding up. It reminds me a lot of The Last Final Girl, which was a novel, but it was written in a way that felt like I was watching a horror film. Like the beginning of the book, it's like we had this action scene, and then it fades to black, and he describes that fade in a way that felt like I was watching a film. Not fade to black, slams to black. And it's like, I get it, we're watching a movie. This is more explicit. This is a legit screenplay. And I felt like even though it's not the same format, supposedly, as The Last Final Girl, I felt there was a lot of similarities here. This book is longer. It is presented as 3 films in a franchise. The films themselves are an adaptation of a real-life account of this stuff happening. So it's like, it's just a series of meta commentary going on here, and I was absolutely here for it. The reason it's not like higher than 3.5 is just because, this type of ambitious approach to a storytelling is not easy to get into. And to be frank, my judgment here, my ratings, is of course weighed by how well I can get into a book. At the same time, I can say this book is going to stand out in ways other books don't. because of what it tries to do. I read The Last Final Girl twice, even though I felt like the structure was a little bit off-putting. And I adore Stephen Graham Jones for what he does and how he does it. It's just really unique. And at the same time, even though it is unique, it feels as if it is pulling from the best of what I love from horror films and like classic 80s horror. I love that feeling. I love that Stephen Graham Jones is the best at giving me that, even when they're not my favorite books of all time. And for me, as someone who loves horror, especially 80s horror and 70s, 80s horror, I love that feeling, that tone, and I'm really appreciative for that. But as far as how it works as a structure, it's hard to stay focused, especially in narration. The narration, by the way, was really top-notch. I really love the narrator. It felt very perfectly fitted for this book, for this story. But as it went on, I found myself struggling to figure out what was happening, or maybe there would be bursts of scenes where I know what's going on, other times I don't. Like we're in a film, and I'm like, okay, what all happened here? Where do we leave off? And then we'll start a new one. And what I love about this novelization, right, these quote-unquote films, is that while they're all interconnected, there is a great deal of originality, like in a way that is not common for a lot of horror film franchises. Like every one, it follows like a new centerpiece for the next story, and it always links back to the first one. And so I really liked it like that. You can think of it more like less of a 3 movies independently of one another, more of just like 3 parts of a larger story. I didn't always grasp all of that. Maybe one day I'll revisit this. It is a pretty long book, 12 hours of audio, but at the same time, it's just, I enjoyed it. I'm glad that I read it, despite it being a hard read. Nothing But Rain by Naomi something. I can't read the title. It's too small. This was a novella by Tor, also text-to-speech. And I will say that I'm really loving my text-to-speech reader I've been using, Natural Reader. I still want to do a review for that, but I'm going to wait another month or so before I do that. This is a story about a town that every time it rains, or every time they touch the water, at least as it's been freshly from the sky, they lose their memory. And the amount of water they touch, the book is not dissimilar to other books that sort of have this type of ambitious speculative setup. It starts out with setting up the speculative world and introducing us to how it works. And then we branch off and actually have a narrative where we're following a conflict that's happening within this world. Personally, those work for me. I like that style, even though it's kind of disconcerting because, you have it's a clear structuring going on, whereas this is clearly part 1, part 2, let's set up the world, let's do something with it. But for me, it worked well enough. It wasn't very long, but I thought it was really interesting thinking about what this world would be like. How would you make sense of it? And there was a way, I think it makes sense of how these people would eventually figure out what's going on. And that's where we come in. We come in where this book itself is like a journal entry from a character in the story who has figured out she's losing memories because of the rain. And so she's realized, I have to take accounts of my memories while I still have them in this book. And so she can pull back to them. And that's what we're getting. We're getting those excerpts of her memories and following along. It was interesting as a style because there were times where some things will happen that we will lose memory in the same way that she does. And there are things that are missing and we don't understand how, until we get that information. And it's interesting to see how the story can be told coherently despite that hindrance that comes with losing memory. And all in all, I thought it was like a very thought-provoking use of the premise. Next up, Lady Bird Johnson by Julia Swig, I think it is. This is a autobiography and historical book about Claudia Johnson, who is better known as Lady Bird Johnson, the wife of LBJ, president who took over after JFK, and who was the president when the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act was passed. This book was interesting because it felt more like a biography of his presidency, of LBJ's presidency, and a little bit of his vice presidency, more than an actual look at her life. We get some bits of her background, but generally it's about his presidency from the eyes of Lady Bird Johnson. And given that I've read now at least a few books that focus on women in history, particularly First Ladies, this is one that didn't pull me in as fully as I thought it would. I really thought this book would appeal to me more strongly. I'm not sure If it was the book itself, it was just the timing that I read it. This is a solid 4-star book. Honestly, I'd put it about on par with Nothing But Rain. I was debating which one to put first, but I think this one would be more memorable than Nothing But Rain. It was interesting to get this historical context to LBJ. It's the first biography I've read of his presidency, but then add the added context through the lens of Lady Bird and understanding her role here. It's always interesting to understand how history overlooks or often disregards the influence of a first lady, and I appreciate it for that perspective. And the only reason it's not higher, really, I don't have a firm reason why. I just know that I feel as if I was expecting it to hook more, and that's really just a matter of raw feelings. Not good for like a quantitative, objective review, but that's the takeaway. I think if you're intrigued by the topic, this book will satisfy. Now, Orm Shadow by Priya Sharma, a book that's taken me so long to read, but I finally got to. And this book was kind of surprising because it's a book about this young boy in a family who basically had to leave, the dad had to leave his job, move in with his brother in the farm which they own, and it's on this town or on this land called Orm Shadow. And there's this historical, fantastical history to that land where supposedly it was built on the back of a dragon who went to sleep there. This book isn't explicitly a fantasy as I thought it was. It is much more using that fantasy as a backdrop to mirror the life and the struggles that our main character, which is the son in the story, is going through, and understanding the drama and the issues that lie within his family, and unpacking that. And it's at its core a family story, and it's about this young boy trying to fit in with his family that has issues that we and he don't quite understand until we get through the book itself. And eventually, when we reach the climax of the story, there is some ambiguity that's going on, but it definitely pulls back it alludes back to that fantastical origins at the core of the story. Never explicitly giving us anything, but rather using it as a mechanism to explore his feelings, and it's some ways it's kind of up to the reader. I'm hoping that's not too much detail. I don't think it is, given the fact that I think this is more a family story, a family drama, than it is a fantastical story. I think I'm leaving you with really not much information. If you're interested in a really compelling family drama in this sort of it felt like we're in the sort of 1800s or so, even though we weren't really given a time span. It felt as if we were in this era where things were slightly progressed but not very industrialized, and hence why they were having to live on the farm and get by. But all in all, a solid book. I'm so excited that I finally got through it. Next up, Our Share of Night, a book that is a behemoth of a book. Made a review about it, and that should be posted by the time this comes up, so I will refer you to that. Let's just say it is occultist horror about this young boy and his father trying to escape from the cult. And then Taxi from Another Planet. This was undoubtedly a favorite of the year, 5 stars. This is a set of essays by Charles S. Cockle, a scientist, astrobiologist, biologist. And it's basically about conversations he has with people in taxis about what he does, about astrobiology, life in the universe, human exploration in space. I highly encourage you to check out the video that I made for this. I'll just say I was surprised at how effective and how engaged I was. I'm a planetary scientist, so maybe I should have expected to be engaged, but I've read plenty of books that sort of delve into or touch on my area of expertise, and they don't always hook me like this book does. So I think it does say something specifically about this book, the kind of conversations that are being had and how they're had. So I really hope you check it out, both the review and the book itself. That is everything. We are at 17 minutes. Wow, I had a lot to say, I suppose. Those are all the books I read this month. 6, unless you got the DNF, 7, isn't my goal. My goal was 10. But, I'm more than half, I guess, which is good. I'm behind on my reading goals right now. I'm not on track to read 100 books, but that is okay. That is okay. I have a rhythm, at least this last month. I was steadily reading books, even if I wasn't reading as much as I thought I wanted to or what I would like to. All in all, I would say I'm satisfied with where I'm at in my reading, as long as I keep up that rhythm, even if that pace isn't quite as high as I thought I would be. Let me know what you read this month. If you're going to check out any of these books, I really hope you do. And as always, hope you stay safe, and I'll see you all next time. Okay? Goodbye.